Hey everyone, what's up? I'm KLF. I have another Hearthstone video class analysis coming at you guys. I'm going to be talking about the Shaman today, which seems to be quite an unorthodox class within the 9 Hearthstone classes. Probably one of the, I would say one of the more challenging classes that I've played or tried to make a deck around so far in my Hearthstone experience. So I have already covered a few of the classes, so let's just stay with me here. Let's dive right in and talk about the Shaman, what he does, and the mechanics and things like that that are all available at his disposal. So we're gonna head over to the Shaman. The Shaman, I do have a sample Shaman deck which we'll get to in a sec, but let's just look at his hero power right now. Usually I look at the hero power first. So it's a Totemic Call. What it is, it's 2 mana. It summons a random totem. So what that means is, for 2 mana, you summon 1 of 4 random totems. Each totem has a different power, so I think each one is by default a 0-2, or 3 out of the 4 of them are 0-2, so 0 attack, 2 health. And 1 totem is a 1-1, so 1 attack, 1 health. So each totem, 1 totem, it's a 0-2, and it has an ability spell power +1. 1 totem is a 0-2 with taunt. 1 totem is a 1-1 with no abilities. And the last totem is what is it? Oh, it's a 0-2, and it at the end of each of your turns, it heals all of your minions for 1 health. And you can only have a max of 1 of each of these totems out in the field at a time. And that's it. That's pretty well all there is to his power. I did feel like his power is a lot more unorthodox compared to some other hero powers. A lot of the other hero powers, something like the Mage, where for 2 mana for 1 damage to anything, I feel like is really good. Some like the Hunter, 2 mana for 2 damage directly to the enemy hero, is a lot more straightforward. The Shaman's power, 2 mana for a totem, I feel like you gotta kind of use it. You gotta use it in combos a lot more. It's a lot more situational, I would say. Like you are going to want to make. I can't even speak. My apologies. You're going to want to make tokens early and often, but you don't want to do so if it's going to sacrifice a lot of board control. What I found from playing the Shaman, and I do have my sample deck list open here already, but I'm gonna dive into some cards before I talk about that deck list. But so one thing I noticed with the Shaman is that it's very important you maintain tempo. It's important that you don't fall behind in board advantage early, because I feel like with some of the tools, or a lot of the tools at the Shaman's disposal, there's not a whole lot of ways he can crawl back into the game. I feel like some other classes, they do have a more efficient way to play from behind or catch up if they're really behind, whereas someone like the Shaman, I feel like it's a lot more difficult. So it's more you want to at least keep a stable board or maintain advantage early. And then once you do so, start making totems, and then use cards or other cards and combos with them, or use it, the extra spell damage +1 or things like that to help maintain that board position all the way to the finish. I found that when I won with my Shaman deck, it was because I picked up an early advantage and didn't look back. And when I lost, it was because I lost the early game and I didn't have the tools at my disposal to kind of keep up to overtake them in the late game. Like, I was able to kind of stall things out or lead into a stalemate, but I found my late game, at least in the deck that I created, wasn't necessarily as good as a lot of other decks that I've played. Like a lot of Priest decks I've played, a couple Mage decks, things like that. So let's dive right into it. Let's talk about some of the cards and some of the mechanics that the Shaman has at his disposal. So you'll notice one of the early ones here. I only have a couple cards with it. It's Overload. So the way Overload works, it's kind of like it's a mechanic meant to balance cards that are cheaper in mana cost. So 1 mana for 3 damage is considered really good. I have 2 of these. It's called Lightning Bolt. I would say this is the removal standard for Shamans. However, it has Overload 1. So what that means is after you play Lightning Bolt, next turn you'll have 1 less mana at your disposal. So think of Lightning Bolt as actually costing 2 mana for 3 damage. It's just split over 2 turns. This means a couple things. One, this means that you need to kind of plan your spells, or plan the way that you're going to cast things a little bit more effectively. And 2, this means that when you're going to be playing spells earlier, you realize, let's say I play Lightning Bolt in the early game on turn 1, turn 2 I only have 1 mana available. that could be a huge detriment. So Lightning Bolt maybe has a bit more utility, let's say on turn 4, turn 5, where on turn 5 I can play it for 1 mana, and then turn 6 I still have 5 mana available. It's not going to set me back. I'm still going to have plenty of options of cards to play. Even if I miss my 6-drop or something like that, I still have other options to play, whereas early game, not as many options. Could be useful for eliminating big threats or cards you just kind of want to get out of the way immediately. So Lightning Bolt is a card that I like, but Overload is definitely meant to kind of nerf or hold some of these cards back. Something like Dust Devil, for instance, as well. It's 1 mana for a 3/1 Wind Fury, but it has Overload 2. So let's say you drop this baby on turn 1. Turn 2, you can't play anything. So you drop them on turn 1, and turn 2, you could theoretically attack the opponent for 6 damage. It almost demands that the opponent deal with it in the early game, because if they let Dust Devil kind of go off for a couple turns, he can easily deal, 9 damage to the opponent, plus have a favorable trade by turn 3. It does set you back turn 2, you can't play anything, but I mean, if you weren't going to play anything anyways, or if all you were going to do is make a totem, Dust Devil could be that turn 1 play that helps achieve the early game, helps you with your board, helps deal some early damage, make the opponent sweat a little bit, things like that. I'm going to go into crafting mode here. Now, you'll notice that I don't have a whole lot of Shaman cards. It's probably one of the classes I have least amount of cards for, but I'm going to go into crafting mode just to talk about a couple of the other Overload cards. So something like Forked Lightning. 1 mana has Overload 2. 1 mana for 2 damage to 2 random enemy minions. Not a bad card. There's an Overload card here, Feral Spirit. I think it's a rare. 3 mana, summon 2/2/3 Spirit Wolves with Taunt. I think that's pretty good. Lava Burst, 3 mana for 5 damage and with an Overload of 2. And Lightning Storm is probably a card that's, I would say it's probably a must in most Shaman decks. 3 mana to deal 2 to 3 damage to all enemy minions. An excellent board wipe, especially because you can play Lightning Storm, even though it has Overload 2, you can play Lightning Storm as early as turn 3, turn 4, and you could, if you can get a 2 or 3 for 1 trade with Lightning Storm, then suddenly your board's looking a lot better, especially against earlier game decks like the Hunter or the Warrior. I feel like, as well, a card like Mana-Tide Totem is also pretty effective. It is a totem, 3 mana for a 0/3 at the end of your turn, draw a card. And it is a totem, so it does take on a similar form as the totems that are spawned using the Shaman's hero power. And so you play it on turn 3, at the end of your turn, draw a card. So you play it on turn 3, immediately it draws you a card. If it lives the turn, anything else on top of that is kind of a bonus. So I feel like Mana-Tide Totem is pretty good, especially if you combo it with other cards, which I'm going to get to in a sec. So the key with the Shaman is you're going to be making lots of totems. You're going to be wanting to keep them alive. You do have some damage spells, some trickery, things like Lightning Bolt, Wind Fury. You can give minions Wind Fury. Frost Shocks, Earth Shocks available as well. Silencing minions, dealing 1 damage. Dealing 1 damage and freezing. So freezing, not an exclusive mage mechanic. It's also present here as well. There's a couple cards I want to talk about here on this second page that are basic, but I feel like they're quite important to Shamans. The first one I want to say is Fire Elemental. I feel like Fire Elemental is really good for its cost to effects and its attack health ratio. 6 mana for a 6/5 is okay in its own right. It's all right. However, its battle cry is, I think, what puts Fire Elemental really over the top. I feel like 6 mana for 6/5 is a solid body for the mana cost, but dealing 3 damage means that you play it, you're going to weaken or trade with something just by playing it, and then you could easily deal damage or trade or force the opponent to deal with it immediately. So even if you played Fire Elemental and your opponent, let's say your opponent hexes it and attacks into it, or assassinates it against a rogue or something like that, I mean, you still managed to trade 2 for 1 because they had to use a kill spell, plus you were able to kill or severely hurt another minion on the board. So I feel like Fire Elemental as a late game option is fairly important as like a win con or a board stabilizer in the mid to late game for the Shaman. Another card I want to talk about is Bloodlust. Bloodlust, now I'm not sure if I come from a Magic the Gathering background. I've played for many years, but casually and a bit more casually, but Bloodlust is one of those cards that reminds me of the Magic card Overrun. So what Bloodlust does is it's 5 mana, it gives all your minions +3 attack this turn. This is one of your win con cards as the Shaman. The reason why is because if you play a bunch of totems, maybe you have a couple other cards, maybe Fire Elemental in play, and you wait until, later, turn 7, turn 8, you play Bloodlust, suddenly all of your totems can now attack. All of your totems become, the one totem becomes a 4/1, and the rest of your totems become 3/2s. So suddenly, let's say you have a few totems on the board, plus you have Fire Elemental or another couple other creatures. You play Bloodlust. Suddenly, you can attack or favorably trade or go for the win in one turn. So you play Bloodlust. Suddenly, let's say all 4 of your totems get +3 attack plus your Fire Elemental. Suddenly, I mean, that's 13 plus 9 damage. That's 22 damage you can deal in one turn from having just your totems and your Fire Elemental. So if you can maintain that board position, play a Bloodlust, you could technically almost win in one turn. Or you can use it for favorable trades, wipe the opponent's board. Even if you trade your totems for your opponent's cards, all you need is really a couple more turns to play your totems again, and then go at them again with Bloodlust, or play some other cards. Maybe give your fatties a Wind Fury. I mean, with a Wind Fury card or a Wind Speaker, and suddenly you're right back in the game. Removal options for the Shaman. We looked at a couple in crafting mode. Lightning Bolt is good. Hex is good as well for trading. Things like Frost Shock or Earth Shock can help kind of tamper with your opponent's creatures. You can even use Rockbiter Weapon just to give your hero or other creatures attack, +3 attack for the turn, so they can trade favorably or do crazy stuff. I feel like Dust Devil plus Rockbiter Weapon, I mean, you play him turn 1, deal 6. If he somehow lives to turn 3, which I doubt he will, but if he did, maybe Rockbiter Weapon, you could deal another 12 damage. So you could deal 18 damage within the first couple of turns. I like that a lot. When looking at what cards you want to pair with the Shaman, and you'll notice that this is kind of what I did for my deck. When you're looking at the cards you want to pair with the Shaman, you want to look at cards like Bloodlust, you want to look at cards like Raid Leader, cards that buff all your other creatures. Direwolf Alpha, and the reason why you look to these creatures is because at the moment you play them, I mean, the Shaman is somewhat reliant on his totems. He's reliant on using his totems for favorable trades. He's using his totems for to help keep his guys alive. You know, that extra taunt creature forces the opponent to attack into another taunt creature, so you can help kind of stall the board a bit. The key with the Shaman is if you can provide attack power or even attack and health power to all of your totems, you're going to put yourself in a position where now you can attack, you can start whittling away at your opponent, you could work into favorable trades because you can trade totems you make with your hero power, with your opponent's creatures. You can start doing crazy stuff like that. You can start, I guess, think of him almost as like combos. And that's what the Shaman is all about. It's about kind of buffing everybody, everyone going in together. Like, that's why something like Bloodlust is so effective, because giving your minions +3 attack in many other decks wouldn't be very good. But in a deck like this, especially when you're dropping totems every turn, you're playing, maybe a lot of smaller creatures, or you're buffing your totems, Bloodlust can be the card that really sways the game into your favor. So that's why cards like Raid Leader, I even have a Defender of Argus in here. So I mean, if you give your totems, I mean, even if you don't use it on your totems, it's just you play them, you buff the 2 creatures there, plus you give them taunt. That's going to help stall the board in your favor, maybe help give you some more trades as well. So and that's what you want as a Shaman. You want to get your board control. Then you could start dropping cards like Wind Speaker on one of your larger creatures. Frostwolf Warlord, I feel like, is kind of a win con, because if you play Frostwolf on turn 5, turn 6, there's already a couple totems in play. That's 5 mana for a 6/6 or a 7/7 easy. And then from there, you can give it Wind Fury, or you can give it Taunt, or you can do what you got to do. Like with cards like, I have a single copy of Ancestral Healing. You can use that to give you Taunt, to force your opponent to deal with your creatures. I feel like there's a lot of tools available that help buff all your creatures. So one thing that I noticed my deck is missing, I do have a couple Lightning Bolts. I feel like my deck is missing, I like the mana totem. Mana Tide Totem. I feel like it could probably benefit from 1 or 2 copies of this. I feel like Lightning Storm is also a must in many Shaman decks, so I could probably benefit from adding a couple copies of Lightning Storm as well. Help deal with board wipes. It helps. It gives me almost a board wipe. It also helps sway board control in my favor. Because I mean, for single target removal, things like Lightning Bolt and favorable trades, or things like that, or Hex will help with single target removal. And then you have things like Lightning Storm that'll help against weenie decks or rush decks. When you look at the win cons, obviously things like I already mentioned, Frostwolf Warrior, Bloodlust, but Fire Elemental, also Stormwind Champion. My deck might benefit from another one, but I feel like, especially when it comes to the high costing curve, I feel like I'm okay. But a Stormwind Champion, again, because you drop Stormwind, suddenly all your totems can attack. All your totems are now 1/3s. So you can whittle away your opponent, or you can attack, maybe a trade when your opponent didn't realize that you could trade. So Stormwind Champion, I feel like, is also a good card. that being said, I suppose this kind of ends my analysis for the Shaman, but those are the keys to remember about the Shaman. So his hero power, going to be making totems that help you out in subtle ways, and you also can use a lot of tribal buffs or things like Raid Leader or Direwolf Alpha, Bloodlust, things like that to help push you over the top. You want to be buffing your creatures constantly. You want to be using your overload spells early and often to help maintain board control or board advantage. And once you have that advantage, you're going to punch through with your win cons as well as your army of totems kind of swarming at the opponent. So, and I did take a look at a couple cards within crafting mode as well, because I know I don't have a whole lot of Shaman cards, but here's a sample deck list for you. If you have any better suggestions or ideas, let me know in the comments. But with that said, this brings my Shaman analysis in Hearthstone to an end. Check out some other class analyses I have on my channel. Just look up KLachievements on YouTube. Also check us out on Twitch, Twitter at KLachievements, and Facebook. Just search for KLachievements. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. I'm KLF, and I am signing off.